Tonight on Primetime, Ukraine's capital is now assessing the aftermath of a major aerial attack, with emergency teams digging through wreckage and President Zelensky pressing allies for stronger protection. Russia's pressure campaign intensifies again. Good evening. Kyiv has come under one of Russia's heaviest overnight attacks in months, with missiles and drones striking homes, infrastructure and the city centre. Well, the assault came after Ukrainian long-range strikes inside Russia, raising fears of another sharp escalation in the war.
Russia launched an overnight wave of missiles and drones targeting the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, in one of the largest aerial assaults in recent months. Residents took shelter in the city's metro stations as the attack damaged residential buildings and civilian infrastructure. Also, a fire broke out on the roof of a hotel along central Shevchenko Boulevard. Officials say it's the second deadliest Russian attack on Kyiv so far this year.
A miracle happened here today, thanks primarily to the work of the rescue teams. This is the first time in Ukraine that 7 people have been rescued from under the rubble.
Earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky had warned that intelligence suggested Russia was preparing a large-scale overnight assault and cut short his visit to Dublin. He was there for the start of Ireland's 6-month rotating presidency of the European Union. Following the attack, Zelensky said emergency crews were still searching through the rubble at more than 20 damaged sites across Kyiv. He said Russia launched more than 70 missiles and nearly 500 attack drones overnight, with the Ukrainian capital as the main target. The president renewed his appeal for additional Western air defence systems, saying stronger protection, including Patriot missile systems and anti-ballistic capabilities, was essential to prevent further attacks. The latest barrage comes just hours after Ukraine carried out long-range drone strikes inside Russia, reportedly targeting an oil refinery in Ufa and defence industrial facilities in the Penza region. Kyiv says the attacks are aimed at weakening Russia's military logistics and energy infrastructure, while Moscow has intensified its aerial campaign against Ukrainian cities. Both deny targeting civilians.
Well, joining me now to discuss this in more detail is Nikola Mikovic, a political analyst from Belgrade. Nikola, thank you very much for joining us. Good to have you with us. Russia firing hundreds of drones then. But what's the thinking behind this predominantly, Nikola? Is this really just about pressure, or is Moscow sort of trying to break morale, do you think?
I see this as Putin's simulation of warfare, because he's striking civilian infrastructure, civilian buildings, logistic terminals, storages, but not military targets. According to Russian reports, they hit some military enterprises in Kyiv, although there is no visual confirmation. Unlike in Russia, where you can freely film the impact of missile and drone strikes, in Ukraine it's strictly forbidden, so you can rarely find out what's exactly what was the target of the Russian armed forces, which is why Russia constantly explains that it never aimed to strike civilian buildings, but no, apparently their target was the military infrastructure, although in reality we don't know what exactly was hit because there is no visual confirmation. In spite of that, I think Russian strikes are, from a military perspective, extremely we're talking about extremely poor performances. They're not efficient at all, because over the past 5 years, not a single bridge over the Dnieper River has been hit. Russia didn't even attempt, according to Russian sources, didn't even attempt to destroy key oil depots in the Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk regions after nearly 5 years of war, which is also very interesting. More importantly, Russia is not trying to isolate those regions it's trying to occupy. Instead, it's using its frontal assault military tactics, losing hundreds, if not thousands, of troops weekly. So Russia is using some very strange tactics in this war and is not achieving any of its goals. Ukraine, on the other hand, proved to be much more serious than Moscow, and as a result, we can see Russian oil refineries burning on a daily basis. So I expect Ukraine to retaliate in the near future, and I expect it to retaliate seriously.
Now, Ukraine is saying it needs more Patriots, more anti-ballistic systems. Is President Zelensky getting the support that he ought to, do you think, from the West at the moment?
He's getting it, but from his perspective and from Ukraine's perspective, it's not enough. That's why he constantly demands more weapons, more Patriot missiles. But even if he eventually gets more Patriot missiles, I don't think that will help Ukraine. It will to some extent, but not 100%, because under the current circumstances where the FPV drones have become a norm in modern warfare, it's impossible to protect your key energy and other facilities completely. Ukraine is trying to do that, and we see reports that it built concrete walls and hangars around its energy facilities to prevent Russia from striking backup generators, because for some reason Moscow policymakers seem to have a fetish on the backup generators. But I think there is no anti-missile system that can protect you 100% from drone strikes. But in spite of that, yes, Ukraine will continue insisting that the West continues providing assistance to its armed forces, and I'm sure the West will do that. Now, it remains to be seen whether that will be enough or not.
Yes, I mean, Ukraine has been hitting oil refineries, defence sites inside Russia, hasn't it? Is that strategy working at the moment, or does it also risk giving Moscow a kind of pretext for even heavier retaliatory strikes?
Well, there's no need for pretext because the war has been going on for nearly 5 years. The strategy is working. It's certainly working. We see that Russia is facing fuel shortages all over the country, not just in western parts of the country, but all over Russia. Ukraine, on the other hand, so far did not have that problem, although reports suggest that in some regions in the southeast of the country, fuel shortages have become a norm after Russian strikes on random gas stations. Maybe not random anymore now, it seems to be systematically striking gas stations in southeastern Ukraine. But what Ukraine is doing is much more efficient because it destroyed several key oil refineries, and as a result, Russia is now forced to import fuel. So Vladimir Putin, what he did was to turn Russia into a poor African country that has enormous natural resources but is unable to produce fuel because it does not have any oil refineries, so it's forced to import it. So that's what Putin's Russia now doing. It's importing fuel from Kazakhstan, from Belarus, even from India. It continues exporting crude, but on the other hand, it has to purchase refined petroleum products, which is a humiliation for countries such as the Russian Federation. Maybe John McCain was not right when he said that Russia was a gas station. It was in the past, but not anymore. Now it's definitely not. Ukraine seems to have destroyed that gas station.
Do you think there's any sense in which, I mean, there have been critics that have suggested that Zelensky has not been willing to come to discussions that might lead to peace. I mean, do you think there's any sense in which Ukraine could be doing more to engage in diplomacy and conversation, or is that completely now off the table?
I think at this point it's off the table. In the future, if Ukraine manages to inflict severe damage to the Russian military, then maybe, yes, maybe there will be some ceasefire, a Minsk-style ceasefire deal that will allow Ukraine and Russia to some extent to prepare for another round of confrontation. But at this point, I think we're far from such a scenario. I think it is Ukraine that has the initiative, and you will see in the coming days that it will inflict severe damage in the Russian military. And energy infrastructure as well. I'm wondering why Ukraine to this day hasn't seized Transnistria, which is territory internationally recognized as part of Moldova, but is under Russian control. And also, for me, it's a mystery why the Crimean Bridge is still standing, because Ukraine does have the capacity to destroy, but it's not doing that. On the other hand, Russia does have the capacity to destroy bridges over the Dnieper River, but it's not doing that either. So there are many mysteries about this war. And I find it very interesting that both sides just refuse to kill each other's leaders, which is what Iran did, which is what Israel did on the very first day when it attacked Iran. But Ukraine and Russia, for some reason, refused to do that, possibly fearing
the
escalation.
The other thing that both sides do, Nicola, is they're both denying targeting civilians at all. I mean, viewers will be able to look at the pictures and make their own determination on that. But Ukrainian cities do keep being hit. Where do you see the sort of moral high ground being at the moment? And do you think it is possible for Ukraine to give an answer to this without losing the moral and political argument?
Yes, if it continues destroying Russian key energy infrastructure, oil depots and oil refineries, then yes, it will avoid killing civilians. But on the other hand, civilians will have to suffer because there will be massive fuel shortages all over Russia. But when I compare this war to the war that we had here in the Balkans in the 1990s, I must say that both Russia and Ukraine are very human compared to what the leaders of Balkan nations that were involved in bloody wars in the 1990s were. Well, because as you know, there were massive war crimes on all sides, which is not the case in Russia and Ukraine, and I think it's good. But that does not mean that the civilian population is not suffering. It is, and there are reports suggesting that the civilian population in Ukraine will suffer this winter. Now, how do they know that? It's quite possible that they got some intelligent information that Russia plans to again strike Ukrainian energy infrastructure, although I think it will be more difficult this time because Ukraine, as I explained, tried to protect those facilities. But nevertheless, I expect Kremlin to try to strike those backup generators and energy infrastructure all over Ukraine this winter. So the population in Ukraine, I'm afraid, will suffer, but in Russia as well, because Ukraine can respond in the same way.
President Zelensky cut short his visit to Dublin, didn't he, after warnings of a major assault. Where do you think EU support is for President Zelensky in Ukraine at this point? Because the President gives us a sense that he's always got to keep one eye on what's going on in Europe, that this support perhaps might sort of peter away if he's not there, if he's not present.
Well, I think the European Union supports Ukraine 100%. Of course, it's not going to send its own troops to fight in Ukraine against Russia, at least not yet. But it's providing financial support to Ukraine and it's arming Ukraine. On the other hand, I do understand Ukrainian leaders why they complain and why they expect the West to provide more support, because from their perspective, that's not enough. And it makes sense. On the other hand, from the European perspective, it makes sense what they're doing, because I think they're not interested in Ukraine's victory, or at least not in a way that Ukraine would like to win this war. Because if Ukraine defeats the Russian Federation and comes out as a clear victor, then it will have significant leverage over many other, if not all, European countries. And its military is currently the most powerful military in Europe, and it has the combat experience. So from that position, Ukraine will negotiate a potential EU membership. I think that's what key EU members are trying to avoid, and that's why they're helping Ukraine, but not in a way that Kyiv would expect to get that aid. So it's rather limited and well calculated. And I think they will continue doing that.
Indeed, very interesting point. Nicola, thank you very much indeed for your analysis. We appreciate you taking the time to join us on Primetime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up, we take a closer look at Ursula von der Leyen's South Caucasus tour from Baku to Yerevan and what it means for the EU's role in the region. Do stay with us. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Ursula von der Leyen's South Caucasus tour continues today in Yerevan, where talks with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan will test how Brussels balances its ties with both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Well, the visit follows von der Leyen's stop in Baku on Wednesday, where the EU announced up to €200 million for regional transport, energy and digital links. In Yerevan, the European Commission President said Armenia will receive a further €18 million to strengthen and diversify trade, completing a €52 million assistance package. Well, von der Leyen said the money could help create a new export promotion agency, while also accusing Russia of putting economic pressure on Armenia and pledging EU support. Well, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says expanding regional energy links could help strengthen Armenia's energy security. Speaking alongside European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Yerevan, he said power lines and interconnectors with Azerbaijan and Turkey could also support the green transition.
In the context of implementing the Crossroads of Peace concept and the inclusive unblocking of regional communication routes, alongside the promotion of transport connectivity, I also attach importance to expanding energy connectivity, including the construction of power transmission lines and interconnectors with neighbouring Turkey and Azerbaijan. This can contribute both to energy security and to the green transition.
Well, to help us separate the politics from the practical details, Nigar Shirinova joins me now in the studio. Nigar, good to have you with us as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with Baku then. Ursula von der Leyen was here yesterday, obviously. What did the EU actually announce?
Thank you so much for having me again in the studio. So yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, was here in Azerbaijan, in Baku, and met with our President Ilham Aliyev. It was very historic visit to Baku because it was first time after the 8th of August joint declaration, peace joint declaration between Azerbaijan and Armenia in Washington. It was on 8th of August 2025, and that's why it's very important that the European Union is now not only speaking about negotiations and peace, but having some real practical steps towards this connectivity and making peace real and practical. And the main announcement here was that EU's initiative, let's say the plan of peace through the connectivity package, which is a 200 million euros assistance to the connectivity in the South Caucasus. It's not something directly done to Azerbaijan, but it's mainly about the region, the South Caucasus. And also here the 200 million euros could mobilize to 2 billion euros with the help of the public and private investors as well. So this is something which we can see within the framework of EU's Global Gateway program. And we will see it by the process in the future. And also, this is not direct financial help or aid to Azerbaijan. It's mainly for the region to support the connectivity in the region, the energy connectivity, also transport corridors in the region, and also, as you said, expanding the digital cooperation in the region.
So the 2 billion is a bigger number. It's a calculation of how much multiple parties might generate between them in the near future.
Yes.
The 200 million, though, is direct investment.
Yes. So the numbers are big, and let's say the interest in the region of European Union is also big, because now there is a different reality after 8th of August declaration, because now we are not only speaking about the peace negotiations, but now we can see real tangible results, and European Union really wants to be in the region and to have some tangible practical results from the region as well. And also we recently had the Armenian elections in Armenia, so it also changed the reality in the region, in the South Caucasus. These are all big events which are causing these effects that we are having right now. And Ursula von der Leyen is now today was in Armenia, Yerevan. So it definitely shows the European Union's interest in this region and the kind of what they can get from here. From the we know that Azerbaijan and European Union are the best partners in the energy. Azerbaijan is very, very important for European Union because it's a very long-term and already settled energy partner for a long period of time. And the strategic position of South Caucasus, Azerbaijan specifically, because everything is from east to west, is going through the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan, and specifically now when we are living in this kind of world where we have many conflicts. We have Russia-Ukraine conflict here, we have the Iran conflict in the south. So the map of the world is now very interesting and appealing, because now the only corridor is the middle corridor, and Azerbaijan is in a very strategic position, and which is very interesting for European Union.
Yeah, some very powerful announcements. You could feel the potential, the positivity emanating from the talks in Baku. Von der Leyen now, of course, in Yerevan. What do you think that she might be committing to, promising Armenia going forward? In the case of Armenia, for example, yesterday she was in Baku, Azerbaijan. This peace through connectivity package, 200 million euros was announced, but in the case of Armenia, it's a bit different, because the case of Azerbaijan and Armenia, they are not identical. European Union's interests is different to Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's more about, in Armenia, it's more about economic interest, when Azerbaijan is a reliable energy partner and strategic interest for European Union. And also in Armenia, the numbers are also different, because it's 52 million euros of support, direct support to Armenia, and also 18 million euros is immediate support to Armenia because of these trade restrictions of Russia done to Armenia. And this is the immediate support to Armenia, which is 18 million euros. And also there is an interesting argument there as well. 80% of Armenian exports now are free from the any kind of tariffs. European Union removed tariffs from the Armenian exports, 80% of Armenian exports, which is supporting the Armenians' economy now, because Armenia now has having different position and is going through a different timing with Russia and Europe, and because now the traditional relations with Russia is different for Armenia. Now Armenia is going more towards the European Union, but still is trying to have good cooperation and have those traditional relations with Russia there. Yeah, it's in a tricky position,
yeah,
isn't it?
Position, yeah.
I mean, we've spoken a lot on this show, many other A News shows, about on the subject of Russian political interference in the Armenian elections.
Yeah.
This is specifically economic pressure that von der Leyen was talking about. Just talk to us a bit more about that. How significant is that, and in what forms is it manifesting itself?
Ursula von der Leyen also mentioned this, that this is the economic pressure which is coming from Russia towards Armenia. However, from other side, Russia is rejecting this argument and saying that this is the right and sovereign decision of Russia and their own decision to make these decisions towards the Armenia. So the positions here are different. They see it from different perspectives, and they try to justify them from their own perspective.
They don't deny the pressure, they just believe it's their right to apply
their
it.
sovereign right to apply those kind of decisions. And Armenia is trying to balance the situation here between the Russia and European Union. Europe is now, as we saw from the visit of Ursula von der Leyen, supporting Armenia. And with this kind of support, economic support, Armenia is now in a not hard position, let's say, but is trying to keep the balance.
President Ilham Aliyev said not too long ago, we won the war and we've won the peace.
Peace, yeah.
I mean, there is no doubt that peace has been established. There are many positive stories emerging. We've seen trade, transportation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. With the two countries' position with each other improving, what is it that the EU wants to see, wants to develop in the South Caucasus?
Yeah, actually President Ilham Aliyev is playing a really great role here because he's the one who creator of this peace in the region. And in the last visit of Ursula von der Leyen and discussions which were led with the President Aliyev, they discussed many cooperations beyond the energy sector, because we have the energy cooperation for a long time, and Azerbaijan is very important energy supplier for energy security for European Union. But now the cooperation is in different fields as well. The middle corridor is here, transport corridors are very important. The renewable energy now, the digital cooperation, energy cooperation there. Then we spoke about the Caspian Sea, Caspian Green Energy Corridor, which is very much important. It's very important to connect Central Asia through Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, then from Georgia towards the European Union. So these all are very southern gas corridor, and for years we are transporting the gas from Azerbaijan to European Union. So these all are very important aspects for European Union, and of course the cooperation on those sectors should be intensified and improved, and to have more and more cooperation with European Union, of course.
Nigar, always great to get your analysis, especially when you come into the studio. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, after the break, Andy Mioch has all the latest business news for us, so don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime, and Andy Mioch has joined us to bring us the very latest business news. Andy, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, oil has extended losses. Washington has rejected renewing the USMCA trade deal. Google lost a legal fight over a record EU antitrust fine, and there's some news out of the auto industry as well. So let's have a look. First up, Brent crude price has fallen towards $70 per barrel after Qatar said the US and Iran made, quote, positive progress during indirect talks. Shipping activity through the Strait of Hormuz also appears to be recovering.
Brent crude oil prices declined towards $70 per barrel on Thursday, extending losses for the third straight session to pre-war levels as maritime supply through the Strait of Hormuz rapidly expanded. The United Arab Emirates restored its exports to over 3.9 million barrels daily, pushing total daily Hormuz flows past 10 million barrels. This surge, combined with ongoing emergency reserve releases and ad hoc Saudi sales to Asia, has created a market surplus. Meanwhile, upcoming peace talks in Qatar face delays due to the funeral of Iran's former supreme leader Ali Khamenei, which begins on July 4th. Geopolitical friction remains high as Tehran demands maritime control over the strait, while US President Donald Trump reiterated his stance against Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, US data showed total domestic oil stockpiles fell to their lowest levels since March 2025, after 12 consecutive weeks of drawdowns.
Europe's top court has refused to overturn a fine of more than 4 billion euros imposed on Google for using its Android mobile operating system to thwart rivals. The record fine by EU antitrust regulators was issued 8 years ago.
Google on Thursday lost its fight against a record fine imposed by EU antitrust regulators 8 years ago. It was fined for using its Android mobile operating system to block rivals. Thursday's court ruling is likely to boost Europe's crackdown on big tech. The European Commission had originally handed out a $4.95 billion fine to Google for its agreements which forced phone manufacturers to pre-install Google Search, the Chrome browser, and the Google Play App Store on their Android devices and prevented them from using rival Android systems. A lower tribunal reduced the fine in 2022. Google then appealed to the Luxembourg-based Court of Justice of the European Union, Europe's highest, but the court sided with the EU antitrust enforcer. A Google spokesperson said the judgment failed to take into account its efforts to ensure Android is open, interoperable, and free. Google has racked up close to $12.6 billion in EU fines in the last decades for various antitrust infringements.
The Trump administration declined to extend the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. The announcement starts a decade-long clock to wind down the trade deal, as the U.S. seeks changes to try to reshore manufacturing jobs and reduce trade deficits with its North American neighbors.
Washington has declined to extend the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, starting the clock ticking on its demise. The decision was announced Wednesday after a 6-year review of the North American Free Trade Zone. Now, the pact will expire after 10 years, unless the three countries agree to renew it with changes. In a statement, US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said Washington would keep talking to Canada and Mexico regarding the agreement's shortcomings. He said upcoming talks on the deal in Mexico City would go ahead. Mexican Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard said efforts would be made to address US concerns over job losses and trade deficits. The USMCA was negotiated during Donald Trump's first administration. It was intended to strengthen the 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement and has underpinned some $1.6 trillion in annual trilateral trade. Back in 2020, Trump lauded the pact as the best agreement we've ever made. However, the new US move had been widely expected. Greer has said more time is needed to address the persistent and growing US deficits with Canada and Mexico. Trump had already thrown the relationship into turmoil after imposing steep tariffs on some goods from both countries. Greer said talks on new arrangements would continue, but added that the president was expected to remain skeptical about any new deal.
Staying in North America, U.S. grocer Kroger said it would buy regional supermarket chain Giant Eagle for more than $1.6 billion. The acquisition, that's meant to strengthen Kroger's presence in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic region, is expected to close in 2027.
Shares of US grocer Kroger fell about 2% on Wednesday after the company said it would buy regional supermarket chain Giant Eagle in a nearly $1.7 billion deal. The move strengthens Kroger's presence in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic region amid intensifying competition. The transaction is the first under CEO Greg Foran and is also Kroger's first major acquisition since its $25 billion merger with Albertsons fell apart in 2024. Family-owned Giant Eagle generates about $9 billion in annual sales. It operates nearly 200 supermarkets and about a dozen standalone pharmacies across parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, and Indiana. Foran said the chain was a good strategic fit for Kroger, which has been battling intense competition from Walmart, Amazon, and other grocers, as still elevated inflation has many consumers seeking cheaper essentials. Kroger has previously said it plans to cut prices on thousands of items, funded partly by direct imports and better use of technology. The Giant Eagle acquisition is expected to close in 2027.
In the auto industry, Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD posted a second consecutive month of global sales growth in June, as a surge in exports helped offset weak demand in its home market.
BYD's global sales rose for a second consecutive month in June. A surge in the Chinese electric vehicle maker's exports helped offset weak demand at home. Reuters calculated that total BYD sales rose 5.5% from a year earlier to over 3,400 vehicles last month. That followed a 0.3% increase in May, which ended an 8-month run of declines. BYD's overseas sales jumped close to 95%, helping to cushion a 22% sales drop in China. This domestic dip extends a run of year-on-year declines that began in May 2025. China sales have been weighed by factors including fading policy support following subsidy cuts and a prolonged property market slump that has hurt household wealth and confidence. BYD also told Reuters it's nearing a decision on its second European plant after Hungary. The carmaker added Spain and France were candidates for brownfield investment.
Still with EVs, Rivian raised its delivery outlook for the year to a range of 65,000 to 70,000 cars. The electric vehicle maker said higher deliveries were driven by its electric delivery van and flagship R1 products.
Rivian Automotive is raising its 2026 delivery guidance range after seeing stronger than expected demand for its electric vehicles during the second quarter. The EV maker said Thursday it now expects to deliver between 65,000 and 70,000 vehicles this year, up from a prior forecast of between 62,000 and 67,000 units. Rivian also said it produced 12,613 vehicles and delivered 12,194 units during the second quarter. Rivian, which will report its second quarter financial results July 30th, said higher deliveries during the second quarter were driven by its electric delivery van and flagship R1 products. The company also started delivering its midsize R2 SUV during the quarter. It's ramping up production of that vehicle at its sole production plant in Normal, Illinois, which has capacity to produce 160,000 of the vehicles annually.
Well, that would be all in the business brief for tonight. Handing it back to you, Guy.
Fascinating stuff as always. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Okay, coming up, we'll take a closer look at the growing demand for accountability in Israel 1,000 days after October the 7th. Welcome back to Primetime. 1,000 days after the October the 7th attack, Israeli protesters have returned to the streets of Jerusalem, demanding accountability from their government. Well, the demonstrations come as families of victims and hostages call for an independent inquiry into the failures that led to the massacre.
Dozens of Israeli protesters took to the streets of Jerusalem to mark 1,000 days since the October 7th attack in 2023. The protest is part of wider commemorations led by bereaved families, hostage families, and survivors. They're demanding accountability and an independent inquiry. Demonstrators gathered outside the Knesset, blocking roads, but were later removed by police. Protesters later stood outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's official residence, holding large photos of hostages who were killed in captivity in Gaza.
We demand an official commission of inquiry by the Israeli government to investigate an independent commission of inquiry to uncover what happened and what policies led to this terrible tragedy, this massacre on October 7th.
Today it's 1,000 days since the October 7th massacre, and no one is actually taking any responsibility. We are heartbroken and terrified, and we came here to demand that the government, that anyone will take responsibility and say that they are sorry and that they are willing to change the reality, so we will make everything good again, and so we will be able to breathe again.
Netanyahu's coalition has promoted a government-appointed inquiry, but protesters say only an independent state commission can examine the political and security failures that preceded the attack. The Hamas-led attack killed around 1,200 people in Israel, while more than 150 others were kidnapped. Israel's war in Gaza killed more than 75,000 people, according to the health ministry, and left much of the territory in ruins before a US-brokered ceasefire in October 2025.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Einat Wilf, former member of the Knesset, former Israeli diplomat and chair of the Oz Party. Dr. Wilf, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Good to have you with us tonight. 1,000 days on, Dr. Wilf, and this demand for an independent inquiry is still so very powerful.
Of course. I mean, this has been the worst single day in Jewish and Israeli history, certainly as a sense the Holocaust. It has been a complete failure of our state institutions and the military. We have since fought back, fought bravely, sacrificed, but still that in the sovereign state of Israel, 251 people, children, babies, mothers, families, the elderly were kidnapped, were held, were more than 1,000 people, 1,200 people massacred in their homes, while the enemy, while the Palestinians in Gaza were essentially building for years the means for this invasion and massacre, the Israeli expectation to get answers from their leaders, from the security establishment, is understandable and entirely justified.
And of course, the government have said that they would prefer to set up their own inquiry. Understandably, that just isn't good enough for the families of the victims.
Of course, there has been an effort to run away from accountability by this government. Again, understandably, in the sense that it is not a small mishap. It is not a kind of government policy failure. It is one of those days that the Jewish people, who are a people of memory, will record, discuss. You know, today is a day that we discuss the day that the Roman Empire breached the walls of the Jewish temple. This is the kind of day that will be remembered and discussed and mourned for centuries, if not millennia to come. And I understand people who are trying to run away from their association with that, but they cannot.
Dr. Wilf, how much of this now do you think is specifically about the horrific events of October the 7th versus also it being about something wider, about public trust more generally in Israel's current leadership?
Of course it goes together because on that day, and this is something that all Israelis remember viscerally, a wide chasm opened between the government and the state institutions and the people. What we had on that day was essentially a government that was missing in action. There was no state. There was barely an army. There was no state. What there was were people, heroes, people who rushed to the front, basically asking no questions. Israelis mobilized in amazing acts of solidarity and mutual help. So you had a people, you had a society, you had heroes, but you had no government and you had no leadership. They were MIA, missing in action. And yes, naturally, you're not likely to be very trustful of a government that both, again, failed is almost a small word for what happened, completely collapsed, and then tries to run away from responsibility. It does not engender trust.
Now, Mr. Netanyahu's supporters say that the country has been at war, and so sort of to some degree accountability needs to wait. His detractors, though, of course, say, well, that's kind of what he always says. You know, there's a war on, so these details, this scrutiny, you know, we'll get to that later. I mean, can it wait?
Of course not. The fact that it's been so long is already a scandal. The fact that it's even become controversial is a scandal. It is something that was and should have been obvious and then turned into something that people fight over. And it's important to know, like with the Yom Kippur War, which was an intelligence and somewhat military failure in 1973, commissions of inquiry are never the last word. You know, you have decades and decades of research and new material that comes up and archives. But commissions of inquiry serve an important role of sending a message of responsibility, of sending a message of accountability, of allowing a nation also to mourn. We have moved so quickly to fight, and we've been fighting ever since, that even for ourselves, we never really stopped to reflect on that day, to realize how close we were to truly existential danger, to understand what our enemies built for years and sometimes decades on our borders. And I think such a commission is needed. Again, it's never going to be the end all and be all, but it is important for accountability, for mourning, for taking count, and also for an official assumption of responsibility.
When we see the families standing outside the Knesset and indeed the Prime Minister's residence, what is it that they're really asking for? Is it the independent inquiry alone, or is it more a complete change of attitude towards this event?
Clearly the latter. I mean, obviously the Commission of Inquiry represents values like assumption of responsibility and accountability. But clearly there's an understanding that is very strong among the people of Israel, but is yet to be reflected in the leadership, in the political leadership of Israel. We are still essentially living a gap between, I think, where the people of Israel are and where their elected leadership is. By the way, I think one of the reasons that they're clinging to power is because the people have moved. And they want something else. They don't just want new people. Like you said, they want a new attitude, an attitude that does not run away from problems, that addresses Israel's core issues, that no longer settles for mediocrity in our leadership, but brings the best that the people of Israel have. And we have a lot of excellent people. So I think you're absolutely right. The Commission of Inquiry merely is understood as a step in a broader, I would say, maturation and growing up of Israeli society and especially of its leadership.
But Dr. Wilf, thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Yeah, good to have you with us tonight on Primetime. Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll be taking a look at NASA's next return to the moon and the rovers being built to help astronauts work there. We'll be right back. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, NASA is preparing for a very different kind of return to the moon. This time, the goal is not to just get there, but to work there, moving astronauts, cargo and equipment across some of the toughest terrain imaginable. Well, to help develop the next generation of lunar rovers for the Artemis program, NASA has selected the space company Astrolab, a pioneer in planetary surface mobility and infrastructure. So what does it take to build a vehicle that can survive and thrive on the moon? Well, joining me now is Dr. Kelly Randall, Head of Civil Space at Astrolab. Kelly, delighted to have you on the show. And firstly, I know it wasn't in the last few days that the partnership was announced, but nevertheless, congratulations on it. Tell us what it means for the company, and also, if it's not too much of a grandiose statement, what it might mean for humanity.
Well, thank you so much, Guy. We really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here with you all tonight. The partnership is incredibly meaningful for Astrolab, and we are really honored that NASA has selected us as one of the providers of the next lunar terrain vehicle for the Artemis program. Since our CEO, Jarrett Matthews, started Astrolab in early 2020, we've always been driving towards this vision of creating a vehicle that both astronauts can drive, but that can also operate robotically on the moon. So it's really the culmination of this vision that our CEO and our company has been working towards. So we're just incredibly excited to see astronauts return to the moon and have the vehicle that they'll be driving for the first time since the LRV during Apollo be one of our Astrolab rovers.
And I'll let you into a secret, Kelly. My kids asked me recently, when are you interviewing the lady that makes cars that drive on the moon? So there's been a lot of excitement, and it really, in some ways, is really as straightforward as that. But I bet it's nothing like straightforward actually creating the engineering required to make this happen. Just tell us about some of the challenges that you have to try and get over to make your lunar rovers actually work.
Absolutely. I love those questions. I always think the kids ask the best questions when it comes to science and the lunar surface. It's a very challenging environment. I mean, especially looking at the amount of time that we'll need to be operating on the moon. These vehicles will be operating for at least initially for at least a year. But then the goal, if we're building out a sustainable base on the moon, is that they'll be operating for years. So one of the challenges in particular is surviving the lunar night. So the temperature differences on the moon can be incredibly dramatic. So they can go from approximately 120, 130 degrees Celsius in the sunlight, all the way down to minus 200 degrees Celsius in the darkness and in the what we call the permanently shadowed regions that never see the sun. So being able to build something that is able to operate in that environment, to stay warm when it's incredibly cold, but then also keep our instruments get that heat off the instruments to be able to operate when it's very warm is challenging. And so we're working through those different challenges, building that into our components and our instruments.
Yeah, amazing.
Another challenge is actually the lunar dust. That's incredibly abrasive. It's like little shards of glass, and it sticks to everything because it's electrostatic. So being able to make sure our mechanisms can operate, that we can keep out that dust, and also keep it off our solar panels and our camera lenses is a huge challenge.
Yeah, and just a never-ending list of things to try and conquer, I imagine. I mean, NASA's long-term goal is a sustained human presence on the moon, isn't it? How do you see Astrolab's tech contributing to that vision over the next decade or so?
I see our technology really contributing from the beginning. So we designed our rover to be what we call a last mile cargo and logistics, cargo transportation, to be able to move people around, to be able to do longer duration exploration missions. So everything that we might need as soon as a lander lands on the surface, the mobility piece is going to be really critical. We want to operate further away from the landing site. So being able to have a rover like Astrolab's be able to take the cargo from where it gets dropped off from a lander, whether it's all the different landers that NASA is currently building through the Commercial Lunar Payload Services program, and to take that cargo to where it needs to go to start building out power, data infrastructure. That's really what we'll need to start building out a sustainable human presence. And that's sort of the initial phase of the moon base that NASA's been talking about.
Kelly, for young people watching, not just my children, but I'm sure millions of others around the world who dream of working in space exploration. What skills, what qualities do you think will be most important as this new lunar economy begins to take shape?
I love this question. I think there's often a misconception about working in space and exploration that you need to be an engineer, you need to be in the sciences, you need to want to be an astronaut, but it takes all different skill sets and different roles to be able to achieve the grand visions that we have. I mean, as a planet, as humanity, to be able to go off the world and start building out sustainable human presence. So I think for me, one of the biggest things is curiosity. You need to be curious about the world. You want to be able to collaborate and contribute with each other. And I think that will be really critical. So I think giving students an opportunity, giving young people an opportunity to see themselves in these roles, education programs, I think are so critical. And that really will give students an opportunity to see their future on the moon. And I think that will be the desire to learn, the desire to grow and work together will be really critical as we build this the moon base off planet.
Dr. Kelly Randall, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Primetime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guy. I really appreciate it.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a closer look at the Doha talks between Washington and Tehran and the fragile deal still taking shape. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Indirect US-Iran talks have resumed in Doha with maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and frozen Iranian funds at the centre of discussions. Well, the talks are focused on implementing parts of the interim agreement reached 2 weeks ago through key differences between Washington and Tehran do remain unresolved.
Maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and the unfreezing of Iranian funds dominated the latest round of indirect US-Iran talks in Doha. Sources say the two-day meetings focused on implementing those parts of the interim agreement announced 2 weeks ago. They said the discussions were technical in nature and that Iran's nuclear program was not discussed.
Denuclearization of Iran is moving along well. They've had very good meetings, and we'll see. We hit them very hard for 3 nights, as you know, but we're getting along very well.
Qatar's foreign ministry said the talks made positive progress on issues linked to the memorandum that halted the war in June and built on the outcomes of the summit in Switzerland. Neither side said whether they had managed to bridge any of their remaining differences. Meanwhile, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has only partially resumed, and Iran has said it intends to begin charging shipping tolls from mid-August after the agreement's toll-free period expires. The next meeting is expected after the week-long funeral procession for Iran's late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which begins on Saturday.
Pakistan is facing overlapping climate threats as monsoon rains arrive while rising temperatures accelerate glacier melt in the north. Authorities are warning of flash floods, landslides, urban flooding and glacial lake outbursts, putting roads, bridges and vulnerable communities at risk. Mariam Zia reports now from Islamabad.
Pakistan's annual monsoon has arrived alongside accelerating glacier melt crisis, exposing how climate change is compounding multiple hazards at once. As the first spell of monsoon rain swept across the country, rain-related incidents turned deadly, while rising temperatures accelerated glacier melt in Pakistan's northern mountains. The National Disaster Management Authority has issued nationwide alerts from July 1st to 4th, warning of glacial lake outbursts, floods, flash floods, landslides, and urban flooding across Gilgit-Baltistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Balochistan, and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Authorities say heavy rainfall combined with accelerated glacial melt could damage roads, bridges, and other critical infrastructure. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif ordered stronger coordination between federal and provincial authorities, saying Pakistan is among the countries affected by the adverse impact of climate change and calling for a coordinated national response. The overlapping threats illustrate how climate change is increasingly producing simultaneous disaster, forcing Pakistan to prepare for multiple climate emergencies rather than a single seasonal event. Mariam Zia, A News.
Back to Iran now, and Tehran says a formal communication channel with the United States will be open to report alleged breaches of the 60-day ceasefire memorandum. But Tehran is also pushing back hard against Washington's security role in the Gulf, signalling that the road to any final agreement remains fragile. Toraj Shirililo has more from Tehran.
Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal Affairs, Kazem Gharibabadi, said after a visit to Qatar that a communication channel would be opened with the US to report alleged breaches of the 60-day ceasefire memorandum of understanding signed on 17th of July to end hostilities. He made the statement following a one-day visit to Doha on Wednesday to negotiate with Qatari and Pakistani mediators over the terms of the Iran-US deal and the roadmap for implementing its provisions. He said it was decided that a communication channel would be established on Thursday and that shortcomings in the implementation of the MOU would be reported, discussed, and addressed in a formal and documented manner. However, in a post on X, the senior diplomat denied there had been any mediated talks with US negotiators, while Iranian and US officials were both visiting Doha. According to Gharibabadi, the meetings of the Iranian delegation were held solely in trilateral formats with the Qatari and Pakistani delegations to follow up on implementation of the provisions of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, particularly those concerning Lebanon and the release of frozen assets. In Doha, he met Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and held separate meetings with Qatari central bank officials to discuss the release of part of Iran's blocked funds, reportedly estimated at $3 billion of a total $12 billion. In another development signaling the bumpy road ahead for Tehran and Washington in reaching a final peace agreement, the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister on Thursday strongly rejected a US Central Command security meeting held in Manama, asserting that the Strait of Hormuz is under Iran's authority, not CENTCOM's. He said the military meeting in Bahrain cannot create legal order or security in the Persian Gulf. Leading the technical level talks with Washington, Gharibabadi added regional security will be ensured by ending US intervention and withdrawing from the region, respecting the sovereignty of countries and accepting new geopolitical realities not under the US military umbrella. Toraj Shirililo from Tehran for A News.
Well, joining me now from Paris, France, is André Schwartz, political analyst and co-founder of the WJC Jewish Diplomatic Corps. André, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight on Primetime. Good to have you with us. I mean, let's start with the basics then. If Doha focused on Hormuz and frozen funds, but not the nuclear issue, how should we evaluate this? Is it genuine progress, or are they really just tackling the easier subjects first?
It's always difficult to understand the strategy of both the U.S. administration under Donald Trump as well as, the Iranian regimes, let alone today when we don't know who's in charge in Tehran, isn't it? We have all sorts of information streaming out of Tehran, including about the availability, let's put it this way, of the current supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei. We do not know if the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Baligaf, is really the point person, and whether he gets support also from the Revolutionary Guards, very importantly, when he speaks on behalf of Iran's regime. Or whether the foreign minister Arakchi gets, the same sort of support, and he speaks on the same voice with the other branches of power in Tehran. So going back to your very important question, it's clear to everyone that without tackling, this very important point, the nuclear element, this is not going to be resolved. One way or another, countries in the Gulf and beyond will feel this Damocles sword over their heads. And that's because Iran's regime, whether under Ali Khamenei or over the last 4 months under supposedly his son's leadership, has not moved 1 inch from their stated desire to, amongst others, destroy the state of Israel, but has also continuously attacked dozens of countries in the more than 10 countries, Muslim countries in the Gulf. Most of them, it's very hard to understand why they have been attacked. Because they were not part to the conflict in any way. We know that, for example, the United Arab Emirates have been subjected to more ballistic missiles and drone attacks than Israel, for example. And so, going back to your question, without the nuclear issue being not only tackled during these negotiations, but actually solved on the ground, via the safe removal of the highly enriched stockpile of uranium, which is currently believed to be buried underneath one of the mountains in Iran, as well as in other locations, other stockpiles of uranium and other materials which could be used to create nuclear bombs. This will not be solved, and people around the region will not be able to breathe more easily.
Moving on to another contentious issue, Andre. Iran has said that from, I think they said mid-August, that they could look at imposing tolls on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that has created some backlash, even outrage in some quarters. But are we right to be outraged by that? Because that's just logical leverage, isn't it? Mr. Trump has used every bit of leverage available to him. Should Iran not also use every bit of leverage available to them?
A fair question, but ultimately it's illegal, right? We keep on saying that countries around the world should be, should respect all international legislation, and so Iran is in breach of legislation when it tries to impose a toll. It already tried a couple of months ago to start imposing a toll. It has supposedly received some money in exchange for which they have permitted for some ships to pass through. And that's when Trump basically said, you know what, we'll block it on our end and really make sure that Iran cannot play this game. And so, it's illegal. It's not the same case as those which are, straits which are man-made, such as the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. In this case, there are multiple countries which share these waters, and there is legislation which basically does not permit for Iran to levy any toll, let alone a toll on any ship which passes through any part of the Straits of Hormuz, including through the Omani side, which we know there are basically 3 lanes currently in the Straits of Hormuz, one which is close to Iran, one which is in the middle, which is where 99% of the traffic was happening up until the end of February, up until the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran started, and the Iranians decided to try and close the Straits of Hormuz. And then there is the Omani side, and the Omani side has basically, permitted for ships to pass through their waters, and many ships have done so, including those under a U.S. sort of protection convoy. But Iran is obviously not happy with that. So they've threatened again today and yesterday. They've threatened all insurers and shipping companies and countries not to try and use the Omani side of the Straits of Hormuz, because they will attack with drones or other means. They will attack these ships again, as they've tried continuously over the last few days. And over the last 2 weeks, I think 14 one-way, kamikaze drones were downed by the U.S. In and around, in other parts of the Gulf.
Now, Andre, the Qataris say that there was positive progress. To be honest, though, neither side's really giving much away, are they? Where are the real sticking points now?
So I think the sticking points, in addition to those that we started this phase of the war, because Iran has been at war with the U.S., with Israel, and with many other parts of the Sunni Muslim world, and not only with those, since the revolution, but since this moment, since the strikes on Iran. I think it was very clear. It's the nuclear issue, it's the ballistic missile issue, and it's also the proxies, Hezbollah and the Houthis, and the militias in Iraq and beyond. Iran should focus on strengthening its population and providing for the population. We know that Tehran, the capital city, it's impossible to continue living in Tehran. Even the president of Iran has said that, because of a lack of drinkable water. It's almost on the brink. Iran should focus on these elements instead of wasting these tens of billions of dollars per annum on these ambitions, which are destructive. So I think, if we reach some sort of agreement on these issues, on the three main sticking points, the nuclear, the proxies, and the ballistic, then we are going to see relief for Iran, but really for the Iranian citizens, rather than seeing relief for the ambitions of destruction of the Revolutionary Guard and of the mullah system. And everyone will be happy, and I'm sure that Trump and his administration will be ready to accommodate for different ways to help the Iranian population going forward. It was a relief to hear your previous guest on your show discuss ambitions about space and beyond. This is what humanity can do in the future. And also we've seen as well the challenges in Pakistan with, and we see it in Venezuela with destruction. Humanity should really gather resources to prevent and to protect rather than to try and destroy. And so, this message might be naive. It won't reach many ears in Tehran, but this is my message. And I think this is what Trump wants. Hopefully not in a naive fashion.
I think that is a noble message, and it's one that I think many would agree. We all hope for peace. I guess that people will have their own views on which side they support. That's perfectly understandable. But given the prominence put on this nuclear issue by President Trump, also by Israel, this is the main issue. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. We've heard it again and again and again that this is clearly very, very key to both the US and Israel. Why is it that they don't seem to have managed to deliver anything yet on that issue that really looks like it's the number one issue being discussed?
Look, ultimately, if you have a regime which will channel all resources towards this sort of ambition, regardless of how illogical to us, to you and me, this might be, they will do that. And this is what we've seen here. This is what we've seen, with North Korea. We've seen it also with Russia's war of Putin's ambition, an imperial war that he has launched upon Ukraine. Again, it's illogical. It doesn't address any sort of the top priorities that the respective countries should have, whether that's Iran, North Korea, or Russia, or others. But that's what you'll have, and so.
Andre,
delay.
Forgive me, and I mean this with respect. We can all agree, how bad the other side is, and talk about that. But I mean, specifically on this question of the US and Israel stating that this is a really important strategy that they're looking to get a result on, and still being unable to get that result. Why do you think that is?
I think it's partly because, Trump and the U.S. administration were not ready to carry this through. During the Second World War, the Allies have gone all the way to Berlin. If they would have stopped after Normandy, the Nazi regime would not have stopped the death machine, which was spreading those horrible results, let's put it this way, around Europe and beyond, in North Africa and beyond. And so, the U.S. administration has stopped short because of international and internal pressure, and also because of logistical issues. We've seen how one of the carriers, had a massive fire there. So there were all of these issues, but they've stopped short, and they are hoping that they have a counterparty now to really engage in conversation with and to reach an understanding instead of really continuing all the way through and potentially sending troops on the ground with machinery and so on, with a huge risk involved to remove the highly enriched uranium, which again is under, hundreds of meters of rock at this point. And, this is a massive undertaking logistically, obviously. But again, if we stop here, if this regime continues on and on, they will again fuel the same tens of billions of dollars per annum from the Iranian citizens towards this ambition. And Trump and his administration will not be there. The US will have another leader who will not be so focused on the Middle East. And so they are hoping, there are many in Tehran, in the regime, who are hoping to delay and then to rebuild the machinery and to rebuild, and to reach, and be a breakout country. The problem is that even versus North Korea, breakout would almost certainly, at least in my view, obviously, mean also a strike, not only on Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but also potentially on many of the Sunni Muslim states, as we've seen now happen, with non-nuclear capabilities, but we've seen the destruction around the Gulf from Iran to countries which are not part of the conflict.
A contentious issue. We thank you, though, very much indeed, Andre, for your analysis, and it's been great to have you with us tonight on Primetime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. France is bracing for another dangerous spell of extreme heat, with wildfires spreading in the south and hospitals already under pressure. Well, the warning comes as authorities confirm 90 drowning deaths since mid-June, many linked to people trying to cool off in rivers, lakes and the sea. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is holding a ministerial meeting on Thursday in the southern French city of Marseille, and that meeting with ministers to discuss the heat wave and the wildfires comes as several blazes approach the city of Marseille. It's something that the fire brigade feared, that the recent spell of hot and dry weather would mean that we could have one of the worst summers in France in recent history in terms of the number and the intensity of the blazes. It's something that happens every summer, but this July and August could be particularly bad months in terms of wildfires in the south of France. Also on Thursday, we've had confirmation that the number of people who died in drowning incidents in France since the 18th of June has risen to 90. Number of people getting into difficulty in rivers, people getting caught in riptides in the sea as they've gone into different bodies of water to try to cool off from the recent extremely high temperatures. There is another heat wave coming next week, starting on the 6th of July. The city of Bordeaux expected to hit temperatures of around 41 degrees Celsius and around 35 degrees here in the French capital, meaning that the government fears extra pressure being put on the health service. Already hospitals are saturated, dealing with people who had suffered heat stroke in the previous heat wave, and they are worried that there could be a new surge of people seeking urgent medical treatment because of the unseasonably high temperatures due to hit France next week. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
A historic first for Georgian-Uzbek relations. Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has landed in Tbilisi for a state visit, marking the first visit by an Uzbek head of state to Georgia. We take a look now at what's on the agenda and why this visit matters for the wider region. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
President Shavkat Mirziyoyev arrived in Tbilisi on Thursday for a landmark state visit. He was welcomed at the airport by Georgia's Vice Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Maka Bajarishvili during an official welcoming ceremony. Later, President Mirziyoyev held face-to-face talks with Georgian President Mikhail Avlashvili following an official welcoming ceremony at the presidential palace. On the agenda, we're deepening bilateral cooperation and regional issues. The visit builds on a relationship gaining real momentum. Last year, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze traveled to Tashkent, where he met Mirziyoyev and pledged to advance the Middle Corridor, the trade route linking China and Central Asia to Europe through the South Caucasus. Officials on both sides have since identified that route alongside the modernized Baku-Tbilisi-Ars railway as a shared priority for improving regional connectivity. Trade between the two countries has been growing steadily under a free trade agreement, with officials aiming to increase bilateral trade toward $1 billion. Georgian investors have also entered Uzbekistan's banking sector, while direct flights between Tashkent and Tbilisi continue to boost tourism and business links. With this visit, both governments are signaling a new chapter in bilateral relations, one built on trade corridors, cultural ties, and a shared stake in regional connectivity. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A major business forum in Baku has put Azerbaijan's role as a regional trade and investment hub in focus. The Black Sea Trade and Development Bank says the country is increasingly important for connecting markets, diversifying economies and supporting private sector growth. Narchicek Yahangeli sent us this report earlier.
The Black Sea Trade and Development Bank, in partnership with Azerbaijan's Export and Investment Promotion Agency, has concluded a business forum in Baku held as part of the 28th annual meeting of the bank's Board of Governors, chaired this year by Azerbaijan. Held under the theme Connecting Markets, Diversifying Economies, Azerbaijan as a regional hub, the forum brought together government officials, financial institutions and business leaders to discuss Azerbaijan's economic priorities, regional cooperation and investment opportunities. Opening the event, Finance Minister Sahil Babayev highlighted Azerbaijan's growing role as a strategic transport and trade link between Europe and Asia. He said the country is focused on diversifying its economy beyond energy, strengthening the private sector, supporting small and medium-sized businesses and increasing integration into regional and global value chains. BSTDB President Serhat Köksal noted that over the past 2 decades, the bank has supported projects across finance, manufacturing, trade and energy, helping create jobs and boost competitiveness. Köksal said the forum provided an important platform for building new partnerships, attracting investment and expanding business networks. The event also featured the signing of a loan agreement to support private sector growth, economic development and trade in Azerbaijan, followed by business-to-business meetings aimed at strengthening collaboration between financial institutions and the private sector. Narçiçek Cahangirli, Avaz Hajiyev, A News.
Afghanistan's population is expected to double by 2060, with millions more people likely to move into already strained cities. UN Habitat is warning that without proper planning, rapid urban growth could deepen poverty, overcrowding and pressure on basic services. Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
It's estimated that around 45 million people live in Afghanistan right now, and in 2060 it's thought about 90 million will be living in the country, double the figure of today according to Population Pyramid. And half of those people in 34 years' time are expected to be living in cities. That's according to the UN Habitat, which says they're concerned that without proper planning, urban growth could worsen existing problems, including overcrowded housing, poor access to clean water, weak sanitation systems, limited public services and unsafe living conditions. The UN agency is stressing the need to prioritize adequate and safe living environment, saying it is essential if Afghan cities are to offer a decent quality of life for all residents. This warning comes at a time when many families have already moved from rural areas to cities in search of work, security, education and basic services. Kabul and other major urban centers have seen increasing demand for housing and infrastructure, while local systems remain under strain. Urban experts say the challenge is not only population growth, but how cities are managed. Proper urban planning, investment in housing, access to services and stronger local governance will be key to preventing further pressure on vulnerable communities. UN Habitat's message is that Afghanistan's cities are growing, but preparation is lagging behind. And without urgent attention, rapid urbanization could deepen poverty and inequality in the years ahead. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Uzbekistan is looking to strengthen its access to the Black Sea by expanding cargo shipments through Georgia's port of Poti. Now, the move is part of Tashkent's wider push to diversify trade routes and deepen its role in the middle corridor linking Central Asia with Europe. Seville Rajapova reports.
Uzbekistan is exploring ways to increase export and import shipments through the Georgian port of Poti, one of the country's main gateways to European and global markets. During meetings in Tbilisi this week, transport officials from Uzbekistan and Georgia discussed expanding cooperation across road, rail, sea and air transport. They also talked about improving the integration of Uzbekistan's transport network with the middle corridors linking Central Asia to Europe. An Uzbek delegation later visited the port of Poti and held talks with the operators of the Free Industrial Zone, container terminals and logistics companies. Discussions focused on expanding storage capacity, container handling, multimodal transport services, and the efficient movement of export, import and transit cargo. The visit also reviewed progress on Uzbekistan's own logistics terminal under construction in Poti's Free Industrial Zone. The 30-hectare, $18.3 million project, launched in September 2024, will include cold storage facilities, warehouses and terminals for bulk, oversized and containerized cargo, providing Uzbek exporters with direct access to Black Sea shipping routes. The project forms part of Uzbekistan's strategy to diversify export corridors, reduce transit risks, and strengthen trade links with Europe and other international markets. It is Seville Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Okay, now let's get the latest World Cup news from Katie Wilson.
Hi, I'm Katie Wilson and here's your World Cup roundup for today. The round of 32 is well underway and there's already been some major upsets, none more so than Germany, who were eliminated from the tournament after losing to Paraguay on penalties. Let's get some reaction to that game.
This is the best freaking experience we have ever had. This generation have not seen this level of football, this Guarani energy that we've seen today was the best experience I've ever had. I just can't describe. So this team, with that energy, with that grit, can face anybody and anybody. So France, next. Come on, let's go.
Honestly, best game I've ever seen in my life. And now bring us friends. We're going to the final.
I'm lost for words. I can't even put it into words. The German team played well. It just wasn't enough. I think Paraguay was too strong at the back. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know.
Now, there's favourites to win the tournament and favourites who stole the hearts of audiences around the world. That can certainly be said for the Japanese fans who saw their team exit the tournament on Monday after losing 2-1 to Brazil. Let's take a look.
I thought the game was very difficult because Brazil seemed too relaxed at the beginning. Then Japan scored and Brazil came back. They got back into the game, but I already knew it was going to be 2-1.
The game was good, but tense. Everybody made us nervous. Japan played really well and put pressure on us, but Brazil also played very well.
I thought we could win today. I even thought we might score a second goal. It's a shame. It's frustrating. Seeing the players' tears at the end, it's quite heartbreaking.
Well, the Brazilians' next game is against the mighty Vikings, Norway. Another set of fans who have stolen hearts with their iconic Viking roar. They'll be hoping their star striker Erling Haaland will score enough goals to take them into the quarter-finals. Let's hear from their captain, Martin Ødegaard.
And Erling, of course, scoring goals every single time he plays almost. So yeah, it's amazing to have him in the team, and we're lucky to have him. And yeah, it's just about giving him as many opportunities as possible.
That's your World Cup news for today. I'll be back on Sunday with more from the tournament. Thanks for watching.
And before we go, some news just in. British energy giant BP has officially handed over operatorship of the strategic Baku-Tbilisi Kyiv oil pipeline to Azerbaijan's state firm Socar. Now, the major transition marks a shift in the region's energy architecture, cementing local management over world-class infrastructure.
A structural shift for global energy logistics. Socar Midstream Operations has officially taken over the Baku-Tbilisi Ceyhan export pipeline from BP. The transition spans all transit segments across Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey, alongside the South Caucasus gas pipeline. While BP retains its role at the Sangachul terminal, the move signals Baku's evolution into an independent manager of mega-scale infrastructure.
BP ran this pipeline for the last 20 years very safely, highly effective and reliable way. And we, as Socar, committed to continue same level of standards and do improve where possible. As we all know, Azerbaijan becomes energy corridor, and BTC play one of the key roles in delivering oil to global energy market. And this is a big responsibility for us as Socar to take this responsibility and ensure that BTC will continue deliver the oil to global market.
Remaining a key shareholder, BP termed the handover a landmark event. In a statement, BP's regional president, Gio Cristofoli, noted,
"Over the past 2 decades, BTC has strengthened energy security as a reliable export route. We are confident that Socar will maintain these high standards, and we remain fully committed to our long-term partnership in the Caspian."
The 1,768-kilometre pipeline is one of the world's critical energy arteries, moving 1 million barrels of crude daily to the Mediterranean. Since 2006, it has delivered over 4.7 billion barrels to global markets, anchoring economic ties between Tbilisi and Ankara. the transition was completed without interrupting supply lines. Thousands of veteran engineers who ran the pipeline under BP are transferring directly to SOCAR. Following last month's handover of the Western Route pipeline, this transfer locks in Azerbaijan's sovereign control over key corridors linking the Caspian directly to the west.
Well, that is all for Primetime for tonight. Andy Mioch will be back with you tomorrow, bringing you the latest news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.